Attention, attention, which is, of course, English.
Yes.
Acting. There you are, James. We finally bow down to your narrow Anglo-American perspective on this most global of events. You happy now?
Yeah, I'm so biased.
Well, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, the Second World War podcast with total disregard for linear narrative. We march in any direction we like, marshalled only by the demands of our similarly eccentric audience. As ever, we have a heaving post bag and lots of content to wade through. I promise in the next month or two, we'll try to get through as many of your questions as we possibly can. In fact, we're actually thinking about doing like a kind of speed dating thing where we try to answer 100 Second World War questions in a single hour, like some sort of Allied high command on speed. Perverting, yes, of course. Can it be done? Of course not. We'll probably get through 3 like normal. Right, but now, today, we have an agenda brought about by James, because you've been moonlighting for some TV channel or something, haven't you?
Yeah, it's disgraceful, isn't it? It's really outrageous. Yeah. Yes, so this... I've done all sorts of things. It's sort of Nazi war machines, which does exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
But this is a slightly more kind of nuanced piece. Lost home movies of the Nazis, and this has been done by some great friends of mine. Martin Davison, he used to be head of commissioning editor for history at the BBC, and Aaron Young, who's a great old collaborator and great pal of mine, and they've discovered that there's lots and lots of home movies that were shot during the Nazi period,
right,
that are just starting to come to light because, of course, after the war, the last thing he wanted to do was kind of advertise the
Go
fact.
down to Boots and get this stuff developed.
Right, well, the stuff's already been developed. That's the thing. But it's then been kind of locked in a box in the attic with a kind of sort of extra strong padlock on it. But now, several generations down the line and 75, 80 years on, it's all starting to kind of emerge. And there's these depositories over in Germany for this stuff. And it's absolutely phenomenal.
If you find this in the attic, you can take it in and basically have it archived and...
Yeah, and there's lots of different archives. It's not one archive, and it's not like it's suddenly one archive has been discovered. There's lots of them, but what no one has done before is sort of bring all this stuff together.
Yeah.
And what they've done is quite an interesting technique. So they've done a sort of goggle box technique where they have a number of historians watching the footage and commenting on what they're watching and just their reaction. I mean, so I was shoved in front of these movies, a whole load of them put together, and I'd never seen them before, and I was just literally just responding to exactly what I was seeing. And boy, it's hard hitting stuff. I mean, it really is. I mean, obviously there's some stuff which is pretty banal. It's sort of lots of gymkhanas and gymnastics and people doing exercises and scout camp, Hitler Youth scout camp, that kind of thing, and it's all pretty innocuous. And then suddenly it all goes a bit horrid. I mean, you've seen the playouts of them. I mean, they're pretty. Well, I mean, just the rough cut, but they're pretty horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that struck me watching it is how how you get these very candid home movies that actually that tell the story of the rise and fall of the Nazi state in a really. I mean, I was first of all struck by, because it starts off with sort of Hitler Youth Boy Scouts, and then you end up in in the first episode, and that leads to people being shot in pits, and you see the absolute total 100% corruption of a culture and a population by a political movement, and it the thing that astonishes me is both things are filmed with the same candor, and that you would crack your home movie camera out when you're doing the Holocaust by bullets,
or Christmas.
So there's Christmas, and that's a really interesting,
the train set,
really amazing,
the gingerbread house,
really excellent juxtaposition in it is of the Russian front in the winter, and then a jolly Christmas at home, and people throwing snowballs at each other. And of course, as I'm sure all of our listeners know, that first winter wasn't a thing that the that the German High Command or the army had really taken into account what the weather, how bitter the weather would be. They thought they were going to have won by then, and defeated the Soviets. So that juxtaposition is really sort of, and it's a propaganda film of Christmas, of kid being given his coal scuttle helmet and all that sort of thing.
I've got to say, the thing that got me was you see all the home domestic stuff and that's all fine, and then you start to see some of the anti-Semitism, and the first bit of footage that I saw dealing with that was from April 1933, so 3.5 months after Hitler takes power.
Yeah,
it's right at the beginning of the Nazi period, and you see some Jews being sort of jostled and pushed around a little bit, and you see people daubing Stars of David on kind of shop fronts and all that kind of stuff, and it's aggressive and nasty and menacing, but it's not. It's just a foretaste of what's going to come.
Yeah.
And then the footage gets worse and worse and worse, and you see how it's stepping stones, how it's small acorns develop into kind of massive great oaks of hatred and Holocaust, and I think it was Nicholas Skarsgård, who's one of the historians in it, he makes a point that 2 million of the Jews, the 6.5 million that were killed in the Holocaust, were not killed in gas chambers, were not killed in death camps. They were just strung up or shot. And you see this. You see in colour film people being lined up against a wall and then shot, and then you see lots of people just looking at the dead bodies. Well, and you also see the degradation, don't you? You see them being kicked out of their homes. There's a whole sequence of them in Dresden. And Dresden has become this kind of sort of byword for the awfulness of the strategic bombing campaign and how awful it was that we killed all these innocent Germans. And there is obviously a big point of that. And Victor Begg was there, and Greg was there, and he was very kind of traumatized by the whole thing. And you can understand why he would be. And yet, when you see, this was an absolute hotbed of Nazism. Yeah. And when you see what they're doing, kicking these Jews out of their homes, and the stress and trauma it's causing them, it's just horrible. It is horrible.
Also, I mean, the other thing and right from the like you say, that very early footage of 33, where this way of treating Jews has been given license. You very much, because there's always that kind of thing with why didn't Jewish people fight back? Why didn't they?
Yeah, why do they just stand there and sit at the edge of the pit?
But you look at it, because it's completely overwhelming what's happening to people. That you have a thing where the normal rules have been completely suspended.
Absolutely.
And it's a thing people talk about called othering now. That it's complete othering, complete total othering, that Jews are no longer German, no longer acceptable. And it's very interesting because Otto Klemperer is one of the the very famous diarist who lived in Dresden, who was a Jew married to a Gentile and had First World War service on his side, and who managed to somehow get through the cracks during the war. He lost his job, had his pet taken off. And there's a thing about,
oh my God, that's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, and this shows how British you and I are, is that the thing with the pets is, oh my God, they've crossed the bloody line there.
But it's a detail of maliciousness.
But Jewish people aren't allowed pets, and they're
not allowed to give them to someone else.
And which is bad enough. But the kicker is, you're not allowed to give them to someone else. They have to be exterminated.
It's just that someone's thought of that and signed on the dotted line.
The vindictiveness in
exactly.
That. And the way that everything's got another cruel twist.
Yes.
And you can see that there is that line of continuity. A camp with Arbach Matt Fry on it. That's a sick joke.
Yes.
A sick taunt at Jewish people who are there to be murdered. And and you can trace that all the way back to, no, you're not allowed a dog, and we're gonna kill the dog. It's you can just see the lineage all the way through. And these, I mean, I thought these, oddly enough, I found the first of because there's 2 episodes. I found the first of the episodes the sort of more affecting, because you go from a scout camp, and it's quite true that Baden-Powell was essentially paramilitary in his ambition, setting up the Scouts,
yes.
setting up stout outdoorsy types to be useful to the British Empire, and then and then it gets this Nazi upgrade, and you've got those Hitler youth camps, but then it starts there with kids camping and having a good time, and I mean I think you even said on the video, what's not to like? You're out with your mates, you're sleeping in the open, it's fun, you're getting some fresh air, some exercise, all that sort of thing. And by the end of that episode, it's people being, home movies of people being murdered. I found it really staggering. The other thing that I thought was really amazing was, you see when Barbarossa starts, the sheer wide open spaces of,
and you realise just how completely stupid the whole invasion is.
Exactly, it's
not
huge,
stupid, but it's just
can't
impossible.
Work. Yeah, it's huge. It's empty. There are no roads. Because there's pictures of those, there's that footage of these tank formations, moving out across great big wide open space and no cover. And all that sort of thing, and it again, the thing it struck me is that there are in a way there's two Second World Wars. There's the one where the Germans catch everyone on the hop, and then there's the one where they have to be winkled out of where they managed to get to, and that's the part one is the quick bit, and then part two is the slow, horrible, remorseless grind part, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
and the Soviets have, it takes them longer. It takes them as long as the turning the thing round, the reversing of fortunes, is the thing that is the story of the Second World War.
Yes,
more than the Blitzkrieg story.
Yeah,
in a way.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, no, it completely is. And the second episode also includes that amazing footage by Helmut Mackemer, who is this doctor. He's an eye doctor, I think, and he gets. And he's an ardent volunteer for it because he's got a wife who is Jewish.
Yep.
And he's desperately trying to prove his bravery, desperately trying to prove that he's doing everything right, following the system.
Yeah.
And he's a very enthusiastic home movie taker, so he's got his little camera, and the footage is just incredible, isn't it? Some of the stuff, including of an operation, that one of a guy having his hand treated. He's obviously got a shrapnel in the kind of sort of bit between his finger and his thumb, and I mean it's so quick, isn't it? It's bish bash bosh, put a bandage on, you're done, next one in.
Yeah.
But anyway, this guy's, I mean, the story is absolutely incredible because he's desperate to get an Iron Cross first class, so he keeps throwing himself in danger and doing crazy things and rescuing the wounded and all the rest of it, and he duly gets his Iron Cross first class, which he's really happy about because he's proving that he's a really good German, and doing his bit for the Fuhrer and all the rest of it and for the cause. And then he probably gets killed. So the footage is the footage of a dead man, but he does get his wife and son.
Yeah.
They are overturned. They are Aryanized.
Yeah.
And it is the only known case of that being so outside of the kind of, high circles. I mean, it is an amazing story just in its own right, and that's kind of a feature of this footage. I thought what was just fascinating was some of the other comments from some of the other historians. I mean, they have this historian there called Nora Krug, who's an illustrator and writes these books, and she's she writes books. She's written a novel called Heimat, and she's done another book on kind of sort of why the Germans feel the way they are and the guilt and all the rest of it. And she's a fascinating person because she's a lot younger. And she's of that kind of sort of next generation that is around at the moment, which is sort of trying to confront this.
Yes,
for so long it's been swept under the carpet.
It's their grandparents rather than their parents, isn't it, or even their great grandparents? So that
exactly.
So because the son of
Mackemer,
is in it,
and deeply touching that scene is,
which is incredibly touching and so sad, and him knowing when his father, remembering when his father died, and his mother knowing about, and
his mother just beating the table, sobbing.
And it's
awful.
It's absolutely ghastly, but he's part of that's one set of experience. But it's like you say, it's the next generation of people going, right, okay, actually, how do we process this? How do we deal with this?
Well, because the home movies themselves throw up all sorts of really uncomfortable kind of realizations that if you're taking a home movie, you're sending it back from the front, you're sending it to a developer, then it's being sent back again. There's lots of people who are therefore seeing that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they're not kicking up a fuss. They're not going, my God, this is outrageous. It's just normal. It's kind of accepted almost. Yeah. And so there is, the big question has always been is, how much do the Germans really know? Do they know about the death? Who knows how much they don't know? And I've interviewed lots of veterans, and when you're talking to a guy who was 19 in 1944, and he was conscripted in late 1943, and he was sent to the Italian front or whatever.
Yeah.
I kind of sort of believe him when he says, he comes from some little village in the middle of nowhere, southeast Germany. I kind of sort of believe him when he says, I really didn't know about that stuff. I believe that, but there's also a heck of a lot of people who clearly did know about it.
But how could they not? When you consider that the war on the Eastern Front is framed entirely as a race war, as a Rassenkrieg. There's and again, there's footage of and a lot of discussion on the film about footage of people setting fire to roofs. Burning everything to the ground.
And there's Jews being beaten with sticks.
Yeah.
There's people being pushed around.
Yeah.
There's naked men who are all being completely humiliated as they're being inspected and stuff. I mean, it's so grotesque, isn't it? It's so upsetting.
And that's the home movies. I mean, because after all, people are writing home, people are writing diaries, and people are talking to each other, and also the propaganda. Especially after Hamburg, which is the point again that the second film makes. That after Hamburg, when you get the total war speech, you get this thing where basically the regime goes, you know perfectly well what we've been up to. Yeah. You know perfectly well what's been done in the German in the name of Germany.
You're all in it.
We're all in this, and there's no, it's Armageddon now. There's no way out of this. Total defeat or total victory because unless you win totally. I mean, I can't remember which. It's a thing I read recently where there's a woman who went to Poland, an enthusiastic Nazi, went to Poland and worked as part of the colonization effort,
right?
The
Lebensraum
thing, and her going out, being put on a farm and being told, right, well, what you got to do is go beat the workers now. These Poles working for them. You need to go out and beat the workers. She says, why? Because
they're scum and they have
what
to
we got to do. You got to go beat the workers, right? So she goes out with the farmhand and with the other German, and they beat the workers. And there's a bit I can't remember which book this is, and it will come to me in a minute. Where she goes, her main takeaway from that is thinking, we better win this war.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's that's in the films. The sheer brutality, and again, it's the point that always gets made is that. In Ukraine in particular, you could have turned up and been liberators, kicking out the Soviets, kicking out the Red Army, kicking out Stalin. You could have played that card quite feasibly. In fact, in the way that they had in German Poland and in the Sudetenland and all that sort of stuff. You could have turned up and gone, "We're freeing you from appalling Bolshevism."
Yeah.
And of course, they don't do that. They do the precise opposite, and because it's a Rassenkrieg, because it's a race war, and as a result, they don't get the population.
No, they get around burning villages instead.
They don't get the population on side, and when they had an opportunity to, of course, they were never ever going to be able to, because everything's only ever framed in these racial terms. So,
of course.
So that's a sort of what if that simply can't exist, but I mean, the brutality in the films was really. Well,
this is the point, isn't it? Because we all know what we know what happened. We've read about it.
Yeah.
Also, but when you see home movies, amateur movies, and you see people being strung up and hanged, you see people being forced to kneel by the edge of the pit, shot in the back of the head and kicked in. You see people just casually kind of, giving people these sort of taking away their shoes. We'll have those and make them wear. It's just so horrible. And I think it just, I found the whole thing kind of profoundly upsetting and moving, and I can't stop thinking about it ever since I watched it. And I just turned up to look at them with no prep whatsoever. And some of it was. Obviously stuff about the film footage of Dunkirk and stuff was really interesting, and but I don't know. It also makes you think about the world we're in today. And the fact that there's any kind of anti-Semitism. I know that no one in the Labour Party at the moment, apart from a few mad people that have been highlighted in that inquiry, are suggesting, slaughtering Jews or anything. But I just feel that the warning from history is that you can go from something which initially seems outrageous and shocking, then becomes normal. So you then have to get to the next level of outrageous and shocking, and that becomes normal. It's stepping stones. If you're not,
out of bottles.
It's stepping stones. If you're not careful, and that's why, when we know what's happened, the fact that there's any kind of anti-Semitism in this country at all, as we're dawning into the kind of third decade of the 21st century, it seems to me absolutely incomprehensible and needs to be completely snapped out.
But also nationalism it's just hardcore nationalism full stop.
I totally agree.
You look at the things being done in its name, and you think, well, this can't be a good idea, surely. The thing I found incredibly striking about it all, though, is that you go, oh, there's going to be this town. We've cleared all the Jews out. We're going to go shoot them. Do you want to bring your cine camera? Oh yeah, sure, no problem. They and so you run into this question of
here's fun.
They know it's a crime,
yeah,
but they're filming it anyway. And what are they going to do? Sit down after Sunday lunch, get a gin and tonic out, and
watch the Jew slaughter?
Exactly. Project it on a screen in their living room. That's where you end up thinking, Jesus Christ, this is how far this has got. When's it on, by the way?
It's on the 28th and the 29th of December in the evening. I think 9 o'clock.
Cheerful Christmas.
Well, post Christmas, settle down with a stiff gin and Armagnac. I'm really proud to be a part of these. I've got to say, I think they're really hard hitting, and I think they're really important stuff. Obviously, a lot of the kind of TV I make is hopefully entertaining and fun and interesting to watch and stuff. But it's all kind of guff, really. But this is. Obviously, I'm making trying to make historical points and things, but this is something that I think people ought to watch. I really think for in the nation today, I just feel we're in such a sort of things haven't gone out of hand, but they just could, and I've had lively exchanges on social media about this at the moment, and quite a few people are sort of going, oh, how can you compare what's going on at the moment with the Nazis? And I'm not comparing it with the Nazis. What I'm saying is, if you're not careful, if you have that kind of complacency attitude that there's kind of sort of degrees of anti-Semitism, some of it's sort of okay, and some of it isn't. Yeah. You're on the rocky road.
Yeah.
It is not acceptable in any form. Full stop.
Yeah.
And we as a wider society, I know we can't vote about momentum and we can't vote about other politicians in the Tory party who might be anti-Semitic or whatever. But as a nation, we can, united, stand up and say, no, this is absolutely outrageous. We're not going to put up with it. And anyone who furthers this kind of stuff needs to be absolutely kicked into touch.
Yeah. It is fascinating that you'd think the events of the Second World War meant that it couldn't possibly return. That it just
you would have thought.
You would have thought, but there it is. It's I had to keep pausing this because a lot of it was sort of basically too horrible to watch. I'll admit that.
Yeah.
And the part of me swung from look, Panzer threes, and that's a Stug 4. My normal sort of kind of. I suppose tank spottering instinct, and then Jesus Christ, I cannot watch this. This is which is I am, however, recommending that people watch it. Obviously,
well, I just think everyone should. I really do. You don't have to watch it. Record it and watch it at a later date when you're feeling in a more sober mood. But I just think everyone should, because I think the warnings are just there. And I'm not saying for a minute that we're going to sort of turn into the Nazi state or anything like that. But I just think it's important that everyone realises how these things can develop, how nationalism can get out of hand, how ideology and racial ideology can get completely out of hand. And there are parallels. There completely are. The rows of Jews and others about to be executed is no different from the guys in the orange jumpsuits about to have their heads chopped off by ISIS. Those horrible videos, which frankly I would never in a million years watch. But it's the same thing. You know, you can see it repeating itself. And you know, the whole point of studying history is A, because it's massively entertaining and it's full and rich of human drama, but it's also because, you know, patterns of human behaviour do repeat.
Yeah.
And
well, because they're deeply ground into culture. I mean, you know, Western Christian culture. The sort of flip side of a lot of Christian culture is anti-Semitism, because what you've got is two old Judaic cults falling out with each other and one blaming the other, and you know, the villain number one in the Christian legend is Judas. You know, it's all been there right from the start, and that's permeated. You know, and also anti-Semitism has so essentially been around for 2,000 years. So it's had an awful lot of practice, and
that is true.
It wriggled its way into all sorts of forms of discourse that people don't even know about. Anyway,
enough of that. But do have a watch.
28th, 29th of December.
Yep.
Lost Home
on
Movies.
BBC. I can't remember if it's BBC Two or BBC Four. It doesn't really matter.
Lost Home Movies of the Nazis. Anyway, we'll try to keep it a bit light and shade of the podcast, as you know. But these films are very dark. But I absolutely would recommend them, because, you know, we do. Sometimes we flip on this show about some of this subject matter, and anyway, we'll return and we'll be telling you about a little venture we've undertaken, and we'll also get stuck into your questions shortly. Bye.
Cheerio.
Welcome back. Now, regular listeners will know that James and I are obsessed with war books, be they histories, first-hand accounts, even works of fact-based fiction. So, for 12 days this Christmas, starting on the 23rd of December, James and I have picked out 6 of our favourites each and read an extract from them. We'll also be discussing both the books and the historical context. I hope you enjoy them. We'll be publishing a book list so you can read more from the ones you find most interesting. I'm having a sort of dilemma. I've already recorded one. Yeah.
Which is The Straits of Messina by Johannes Steinhoff, because I've just read it and it's completely fantastic. And I love the fact that it's an air war book, but told from the perspective of the Germans when they're down on their luck, to put it mildly. So that's a really interesting one. But then I'm having a little bit, because I was sort of thinking, well, you know, we should do a bit of Eastern Front, you know, we should do a bit of kind of Far East, you know, mix it up, a bit of air, land and sea, don't worry, kind of TV.
Yeah.
But, you know, sort of, and then Tony said to us, well, you know, of course you'll be doing First Light, won't you?
That's our producer, by the way, Tony.
Tony said, well, you'll be doing First Light, won't you? You know, particularly with my sort of connection with Jeff and everything. And I thought, well, yeah, but most of our listeners, I reckon, have probably read that one. So I think that's just too obvious. And although I love it, that's not on my list. Then I was very keen to do The Cruel Sea, because I thought it was really important to do a bit of naval stuff, but I can't actually find it. I just can't find it at home. I've got it somewhere. But at the moment I can't find it. Then I was suddenly thinking, it's all a bit blokesy, isn't it? You know, what about some sort of female writing?
It's a bit woke of you, James.
It is a bit woke of me, isn't it? So I was looking
woke
at
Holland.
Well, I was looking at a book that I haven't actually read, Notes from the Blockade. By Lydia Ginsburg, you know, of the siege of Leningrad. But then is that a bit depressing for Christmas?
No.
But I mean, it does. I mean, I had a quick flick through last night. It looks amazing, and it's it's a very famous book. I just never read it.
You should definitely
Or do I do War on the Val d'Orcia by Iris Arrigo, which is, you know. But then on the other hand, then I've got another one from Italy. So I don't know. It's difficult.
It is hard. I've gone for some Spike, inevitably.
Yeah, of course. And you're doing George MacDonald Fraser, aren't you?
I do. Yeah, it's Quarter to Safe out here, and the bit from the Cauldron, Zeno, which is a novel, but Zeno, or what is his name, Macquarie, I think his name was he was there in the Independent Company. Quite an interesting character in himself. There's
also Alexander Barron, who we could do.
Well, maybe Alexander Barron. I mean,
there's Evening War.
The problem is this is a bottomless pit, isn't it?
Well, the alternative is that actually everyone finds this quite interesting and quite enjoys it, and then we just do some more.
Well, obviously.
At a later stage, in which case problem solved.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm just going to do what I want.
Okay, you do whatever you want, James, because that's the beauty of podcasting. We haven't had to go to a meeting with the commissioning editor where they've gone, I'm sorry, but you're not woke Holland enough. Right, we've some questions. And with those, by the way, those are starting on the 23rd, and they're kind of like 12, 15-minute, 20-minute extracts. And we'll be discussing there'll be a little bit where we discuss what each one is and where they fit in, and how difficult it is to get hold of a copy of The Cauldron by Zeno.
And do you put on an American accent if you're doing an American book?
Well, I'm a man.
German.
I'm a man of many voices.
And then I got into my Messerschmitt. And
Well,
I
well,
climbed
I
up
think-
above Sicily.
I think you definitely have to do that.
But if I'm doing Serenade for the Big Bird, do I don't know. Or Ernie Pyle, it's a tricky.
Right, Alec writes to us. Loving the podcast, gents. So he's straight out the gate there. I was wondering about Red Cross parcels for Allied POWs. How did they get through? Did the Germans set aside transport for them? You know what? I don't know.
Nor do I.
And this is one of those things, because whenever you read a thing about POWs, there's always the stuff about the Red Cross parcels, and particularly, The Great Escape is about how they refashion the tins and they scavenge stuff and they use them for barter
when I
and
was
trade.
in Colditz the other day, there was this fantastic
When I was in
postcard.
Colditz the other day.
Just a few weeks ago, there was a fantastic letter from a guy saying, dear, whatever his son was, let's say Nicholas, he said, I'm terribly sorry I'm not going to be home for Christmas. And rather unfortunately, I've been captured and I'm in a prison camp and a bit of a bore. But anyways, it was amazing. But obviously that got through.
Must have gone through Switzerland then. Surely Switzerland
Sweden,
being neutral.
It's got to be those neutral countries, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to be. So you could fly in there or
Well, that's always the question, is because were there, there will be a listener who knows this, there must have been overflights to Switzerland that were like, you'd get on the phone and you'd say to the Germans, this is a humanitarian diplomatic bag style flight that's coming over. I mean, surely that's what they did. Must have been because the other end of it, isn't it? You've got people escape lines out into over the Pyrenees into Spain, stuff like that. And once you're in Spain, then Spain was neutral, so then you got home. But again, how, without being, because once the ship's left Spain, it's not is it neutral anymore? Or this is an interesting thing. And I'll admit it, I don't know. James doesn't know. So if anyone knows how this worked, please let us know, because it's fascinating because what it speaks of is a kind of and of course different combatants, prisoners were treated in different ways as we know, and what it speaks of is some sort of way in which the Germans are talking to the British and going, all right, okay.
Red Cross parcels. I mean, they are getting through, aren't they? They just are.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just amazing.
And intermittently, and sometimes
and it's just amazing. I've been kind of sort of obsessed about this subject for the last 20 years. I mean, I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
I've never thought about it.
He's never thought about it. So if someone knows, let us know, and I might try and go away and find out.
Yeah,
I reckon Guy Walters would probably know.
He would, wouldn't he? Because he's written about the Great Escape.
He's written about the Great Escape, so he'll have at least checked out.
Okay.
Well,
we'll talk to Guy.
Okay. What's the next one?
Hawksey. Hi, chaps. We all know the stories of Operation Chastise Jericho, etc. But did the Germans ever go for special surgical bombing missions? Keep up the great work.
Well, I suppose
Cheers.
the Beiderbecke raids are the closest thing to a sort of... The Germans didn't do this.
No.
The Germans never really got their heads round... Were never, ever thinking in terms of strategic bombing anyway. The strategic bombing they did was all an accident.
It was going to be, but there was General Viva, who then got... he learned to fly but wasn't very good at it. Took off in a Heinkel 111, I think it was, in not very good weather, and promptly killed himself, and that was that. And his place was taken over by Yashonik, who was very against the Strategic Air Force. So just at the very point where Strategic Air Force was going to be built, they didn't. And what's really interesting is they did try and build a heavy bomber, didn't they, during the war?
Yeah.
I mean, they built the Heinkel 177, which is a total dog. Absolutely awful, and killed something like 32 of the Luftwaffe's greatest test pilots in the process, including one of them blowing up in front of Hitler on a demo. I mean, it was it was just an awful plane.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the French created this thing called a Bloch, which could fly over 300 miles an hour and was a heavy bomber. It was a 4-engine bomber. It was just absolutely amazing. Only one was ever built, I think. And the Germans flew it till the end of the war. But why the heck didn't they reverse engineer it?
Or the jigs are at the factory or whatever. Yes. I mean, but
it is on a plate.
But I mean, one of the reasons they didn't is because they were by the middle of 42, the Luftwaffe is playing a permanent game of catch up. It's basically
it's completely overstretched.
Even though in 1944 the Germans produce more planes than the British do. 40,000, we produce 36,000, something like that. But they're smaller planes with a lower tonnage, lower load, lower thinner metal, lower tactical capacity, and all that sort of thing. No one gets close to until the B-29 to what a Lancaster can carry. Mosquito's carrying the same as a B-17 effectively when they're both running it fully loaded. But anyway, the point is, even though the Germans are producing more stuff, then they've not got the pilots, and they're permanently playing catch up.
Yep.
And in all the theatres, what happens is the Allied Air Force wins, overpowers, gains air superiority, and then finally in Northwest Europe, air supremacy,
yes,
where you can't actually put any planes up.
Yeah.
And so the Germans aren't thinking, well, what we'll do is a sneak raid on the Derwent Dam. But
the interesting thing is
they do get hold of a bouncing bomb.
They do get hold of a bouncing bomb, completely intact from one that comes down on the dam's raid.
Yeah.
But even if they want to reverse engineer it, and they do take it to pieces, and they look at it and they examine it and work out exactly what it's done as. I mean, they can't do anything about it because there isn't a plane that they've got in their arsenal that can carry it.
Yeah.
I mean, only the Lancaster is the only plane in the world that at that stage that can carry an upkeep. The
Also,
larger bouncing bomb. But what is really interesting about it is that Hitler is the one who is quite obsessed with bombing.
Yeah.
And in the summer of 1943, when the net is absolutely kind of closing in around the Third Reich from a kind of air power point of view, it is completely obvious to even Goering, but all his junior commanders, most of whom are pretty competent, actually.
Yeah.
You're talking about sort of Gallant and even Beppo Schmidt sort of tidied up his act since his intelligence days in the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty good people around. And they all recognise that what you need to do is have fighters to do the defence of the Reich. And Hitler overrules them and says, no, we're not doing that. I want bombers.
Yeah.
And they go, but we didn't win in 1940 when we were against an inferior numbers Air Force, and we had the most bombers we've ever had. But we're never going to be able to do it. And he goes, I don't care.
But so much of this is the fact that the Allied bombing campaign is gaining in effectiveness, strength, momentum, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, with every passing week.
And the Germans think, well, we haven't got the answer to that, so they start spending vast amounts of time, effort, and money on the V weapon program.
Yes, and Milk, who is the number two.
They try to leapfrog the problem of not having a strategic bomber,
right?
And switch to this miracle weapon. And again, it's always one of these. It's always this thing. If they'd not spent the money, and it's like we were saying earlier, it's a counterfactual that's not possible. If they'd thought differently and thought, actually, we're spunking a huge amount of money on this. We're completely wasting money, time, and expertise on this thing. Just a decent 4-engine strategic bomber might do the trick, because the Baby Blitz, after all, in early 44.
Yeah.
Catches the British out to start with, because we're not expecting them to even bother trying it any more bombing. I mean, obviously it's then defeated.
But when Hitler says in, I think it's sort of September 1943, he goes, no, we've got to have a bomber force, and you've got to organise it, get a bomber force, and go and bomb Britain immediately. That's the best, attack is the best form of defence, all this kind of stuff. What Milk does, who is the number two of the Luftwaffe, basically running the show, albeit kind of sort of paying lip service to Goering. What he does is, okay, so this is what we're going to do, boys. We're just going to carry on making loads and loads of fighter planes. And what we'll do is we'll call the V rocket, the V weapons, we'll call them, air comma bombers.
Yeah.
Because they are delivering bombs, and that's just our new bomber force.
Yeah.
And that's how we'll get around the Führer. And it just, he falls for it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
But he falls for it too much hook, line, and sinker, because then, of course, when the ME-262 is being trialled, everyone's finding, Gallant's sort of rubbing his hands together, thinking, great, we finally got a decent fighter that might be able to take on these Thunderbolts and Mustangs and kind of Typhoons and stuff. Hitler goes, oh, no, you're not using that as fighter.
Yeah.
That's got to be a bomber.
Yeah, background attack aircraft. Yeah. So they basically, Hawksy, they didn't get round to it.
They just didn't have the kit. They didn't have the capability.
You do have things like guided by wire anti-shipping missiles. It's in shipping that this sort of precision attack weapons, surgical attack weapons, are much more kind of useful. And you do have a couple of ships in Italy that are sunk with wire guided missiles.
Yes,
and there's also, isn't that right?
Yes, and there is a Junkers that does, it seems, make it all the way to the east coast of America on a single flight, and then you've got my old Nazi chum Heyer Hermann who drops a bomb in Perez Harbour and hits an ammunition ship, and the whole thing blows up. So there are moments of rare success.
I mean, the other thing is,
but basically, you're absolutely right. They don't have the capacity, don't have the capability, and they don't have the time.
But of course, I mean, the thing to note is that Harris didn't think too much of this sort of stuff anyway, did he?
No.
I mean, 617 Squadron. It's all very interesting, but they are the exception that proves the rule. That actually, what Bomber Command is about. Let's call it dehousing. Let's just use that euphemism for today.
Area bombing.
Right. Okay. So what's the next one? Andy and Brum asks, reading Beaver's Ardennes book, how was Hodges not fired / shot for incompetence at the Hurtgen Forest? Well, being shot's that's a bit more Soviet than. Well,
Anthony's quite down on the kind of Allied policy in the final months of the war. It has to be said. I mean, all I'd say is that I think if you're following a broad front policy, which makes sense on many levels, because the narrow front policy when they tried it at Market Garden didn't work.
Yeah.
And politically is absolutely essential because if you have a narrow front, that means you can't fit all your forces into one narrow front. So some of them are missing out, and
someone's got to go first. Yeah,
and someone's got to go first. And the whole point about the broad front policy is very sort of ingrained into American strategy.
Yeah.
And their point is we've got lots. Let's shove lots at it and put pressure points absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
The problem you've got is it goes back again to that whole issue of geography, because if you look at the map, there's very, very few easy entry points into Germany.
Yeah.
You know, the whole of the German front line from north of Aachen all the way down to the old Maginot line is really forested and hilly. And there's just no way around it. And I know there were some tactical mistakes about kind of, the lakes and stuff like that. But basically, I don't really see that they had any choice whatsoever.
But also,
all these generals, they get criticised a lot for not having the tactical flair of the Germans and not having the ruthlessness. I think they were completely ruthless. But I think also you have to understand that you're dealing with conscript armies where you're trying to keep the number of casualties to a bare minimum. And, what you're trying to do is use your huge industrial strength and weight of firepower to do the hard yards for you. But in the autumn of 1944, as we all know, because of the ports crisis and the overextension of lines of communication, that was not quite as powerful as it was. And a lot of the huge, the sort of USP of the Allied forces is to use air power. And of course, when it's a really shitty, crappy day, you can't use it. And we had these terrible winters, one after the other, during the Second World War. So I don't think he's entirely to blame.
But if you sack Hodges, you've got to sack Bradley. And this is the other thing. And then you got to sack Ike.
I just don't think Hodges was that bad.
No. I mean, the thing is
at all.
There's certainly some dominoes. If you want the buck to stop with Hodges, then it's got to stop with Bradley, and then really with their boss.
What I would say to Anthony, and what I'd also say to Andy and Brum, is show me give me an alternative plan. What would you have done differently? And I'm sure he would say, well, tactically, I would have done this and I wouldn't have crossed X when I did on that particular day. But that's taking it to a micro level, which is sort of almost below Hodges' level. I mean, Hodges' level, he's talking broad brush stuff, and it's kind of overall kind of strategy for his part of the line.
Yeah.
That part of the line is you're in the line, and in front of you is Hurtgen Forest. Get through it.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the problem you've got also is not only is it bad weather, in a forest you can't really see your enemy so well from above.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say there's enough.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of forest, and it's just you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah. Ian Wolfe, which
Ian Wolfe,
sort of seasonal surname. Hi chaps, love the podcast. As we're nearing that time of year, how was Christmas marked during the war? Did fighting continue on the 25th?
100%.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I mean, for instance,
no Christmas truce in World War II.
The Battle of the Bulge, which is about to start, starts next week.
16th,
yeah. Fighting on Christmas Day was as full on and bitter as any other day during that campaign.
Well, as Pee Wee Martin was saying when I talked to him the other day, he was saying on Christmas Day he was in a foxhole freezing his nuts off. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I've just been handed a note. Anything like the First World War football? Now, of course, all our First World War historian friends are now gnashing their teeth and wailing at the
What football, man?
What football, exactly.
And it wasn't where the marker is.
It wasn't where the marker is. It never bloody happened.
Hug Street or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't football.
No. I mean, the thing is you do get, and it'll be in one of the, one of the books I'm going to read is Milligan's Christmas in 1943, which is amazing to read about, absolutely fascinating. But they weren't in the line. So they weren't.
Yes,
they weren't shelling anyone
that's the caveat I was just about to make.
They weren't shelling anyone or being shelled and all that. They weren't in the line, so they were out of harm's reach, and so they were very well taken care of. And that's that. I mean, the really interesting thing about you read that is it's they're all pissed. It's Turkey. It's a big happy smashing day. Actually, their Christmas day, which is a marked contrast to then if 2 years later a year later in the Bulge, where it's it's house by house, bitterly cold, all that sort of thing. Anyway,
well, I think you're absolutely right. If you're in the line, it's miserable and there's no football matches. If you're out of the line, if you're a base waller, if you're one of the nearly 50% of service troops, your chances of being able to celebrate it are a little bit higher. But whether the football matches, I haven't read one.
No. Okay, excellent. Well,
there you go. Well, that's
crikey.
it.
We hope you've enjoyed the podcast this year. We start in the spring, and I feel we're now deep into our winter campaign, sort of podcast Barbarossa without all the nasty bits. Can we turn back now and break out, James?
No.
I mean, this.
It's been brilliant fun, hasn't it? I've really enjoyed it.
And I mean, this all came about because basically the year before last, you and I sat in a pub and talked about the war with.
We actually made an appointment to sit in a pub and talk about the war.
Yeah.
Shall we meet in a pub and talk about the war?
That's exactly what we did.
It was great fun.
But so here it is. And I've been very touched by people getting in touch to say how much they like the podcast.
I love all the questions as well. I mean, some of them are just, absolutely stumped me. Some of them, it's been really nice to kind of use them as a launch pad for sitting on my soapbox and getting stuff off my chest.
Absolutely. But I mean, the thing I was at an event last night, and I had that thing, when someone touches you on the elbow because they want your attention, bloke touches me on the elbow and goes, I really love We Have Ways. And that was our little moment together. And there's been an awful lot of that this year. So a huge thank you to our listeners. And the response to this has been absolutely brilliant. I've learned so much. I'm having to read so much just to stand still to keep up with James here.
Well, it has been great. And, please do keep, getting in touch and using Twitter, the hashtag We Have Ways, or via the email for old people, of course.
Yes.
We Have Ways podcast @gmail.com. There's various other things we're planning, aren't we? You've got your trip to the BBMF. So it's playing with Spitfires and Hurricanes and a Lancaster. So you've got that.
And the Dakota.
Yeah, I've got part 2 of Stuart Watson.
Brilliant.
Who does talk about Christmas, actually.
Oh, great.
Christmas 1944. We've got our Christmas books. And are we still going to the Ardennes? We're sort of thinking about it.
Trying to figure out how to get there.
But it might be January now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're hopefully going off to the Ardennes. But bye for now.
Cheerio.